but I will go ahead. We're recording now. Thank you, Carl. And begin a call to order the Wednesday, January 6th, 2021. I underline that to make sure I got it correct. Happy New Year, everyone. Regular meeting of the Garrison Board of Education. Happy New Year. Dusty, would you call the roll for us, please?
Sure. Jocelyn Apicello.
Here.
David Gelber.
Here.
James Hoke, we're waiting for. Madeline Julian.
Here.
Courtney McCarthy.
Excused.
Matthew Spicer.
Excused.
Sarah Tormey.
Here. Okay. I will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Next, we move on to accept agenda changes. Does anyone have any agenda changes or suggestions? Okay, then I'm going to read the recommended action. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby accepts the agenda as presented. May I have a motion, please?
Second. So moved. Oh.
Okay. Thank you. And we'll move to a roll call vote, please, Dusty.
Jocelyn Apicello.
Aye.
David Gelber.
Aye.
Madeline Julian.
Aye.
Sarah Tormey.
Aye. Okay. Just checking to see if I have James in the audience yet. I can reach him. Real quick, sorry guys. Really wanted somebody to be here for the presentations. Okay, next we're going to move on to board communications and presentations. First, we have a capital project update from Tetra Tech Architects and CalG Construction. Welcome them back. I understand that they will be presenting the budget, and this has been reviewed with the facilities committee. And I just want to thank Madeline and Matt and David for their time on that committee so far. I know it's been a lot of work and we're making great progress. So on to the presentation. I'll turn it over to Garrett.
Good evening, everyone.
Welcome, Garrett. Thank you.
Thanks for having us. So Dusty, if Keith Gallup is also in the audience, if you could promote him. I'm not sure if he was going to be able to join us. And you have Eric and David too. So, so tonight we have a brief update on the capital project. I wanted to start by giving you a little bit of specifics on the construction documents and SED. I'll do that, and then David Chen will review the incidental budget. So the project budget's divided into construction funds and incidental funds, and we've been working on the incidental side of the budget. So David will present that tonight. So regarding the submission to SED, I'm really pleased to say that the construction documents were completed right on time. On December 11th, we submitted them to SED. I checked the SED website on a regular basis, and they were checked in on the 14th of December. And then the first step in the process is they do a completeness review. This is something they instituted a couple years ago to make sure that sets were ready for review. They give it a pretty thorough look to make sure everything's there, to make sure all the paperwork is there. And I'm pleased to report that they didn't request any additional information from us. They deemed it complete on December 23rd. So we're off to the races now. Excuse me, the SED review process from this point out is comprised of three parts. One is the project manager review and approval. The second is architectural review and approval. And then the third is mechanical, the engineering side of the process. So it's a mechanical review and approval. And we anticipate that SED's backlog is about 10 weeks right now. It's creeping up a little bit. And so we anticipate getting comments from them sometime about 10 weeks from now. More so. And we'll, as soon as we get those comments, we will jump right on them, respond to them. I'm confident they will not have an extensive list, and that will be the point where we'll get the project approved by SED. So we're in good shape on that front. With that, I'll hand it over to David. Dusty, I think it might be beneficial to share the incidental budget page that David sent out the other day. And David, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Ken. So above the red line is the construction cost, contingency allowance and escalation budget for the project. Below the red line is category or section 5 is the project incidental cost budget and the soft cost. So anyway, this section is also breaking down further into consultant fee, owner's fee, testing and inspection, interior furniture, equipment and system, and project soft cost contingency. Consultant fee is architectural service, construction manager, commission consultant, this project management software, and also we have all the survey, asbestos hazmat survey, site survey, and soil survey, and also we have the thermal imaging for the roof scan. So those comprise of a consultant service fee. So if then we move on to the owner's fee. So owner's fee consists of legal fee, bond counsel, and bond counsel closing fee, bond closing fee. Anyway, so this was suggested by the financial advisor to combine the bond counsel and the closing cost together as one line item of 65,000. The financial advisor will be suggest that we up the 15,000 cost budget cost to 45,000 on that line item, and also suggested that we move what we have allowed as a band interest, a bond anticipated no interest, 150,000. Move whatever is left over from that line item up the line to allowance. So you can see if we can go back up to the allowance. You can see we move from on the section 3 allowance. We didn't have anything for a payment allowance, but we now move this 110,000 from the soft cost up to this category in terms of allowance. So it can be spent, any location or anywhere that we need it in the construction end, or it can be moved back down to the soft cost if we have a shortfall in the soft cost. It's just sitting there as an allowance, so it can be used anywhere you wish. So Dusty, can we move back down? Okay, Then building permit, as Garrick had explained it to all of you, the SED review time right now is about 10 weeks. So originally we thought that if we want this project to go out to bid in February or March, we need a third party expedited review of the document. But because our situation or the workload at SED right now is 10 weeks, so we felt that we don't need that third party review and cost to be added to the budget. So that we leave the line item, but we put NA. Then the insurance, owner's builder's risk insurance for 2 years. We carry that for 30,000. That's the insurance premium that school had to pay for this builder risk insurance. Then the next two line item, 45,000 each. It represent the school either outsource the service or can do the work in-house. This is to vacate space in order for the contractor to work and then make the space ready once the contractor is finished to make the space ready for the class. So those two line items represent that type of work that owner had to carry in their budget. And then the next item is the bidding expense. We didn't have much money there because we kind of offload that cost to the contractor now. We used to have to print all the bidding document for the contractor and they pay a deposit. We do away with that. We are uploading all the bidding document to FTP site for them to free download. And then they have to, they can order the print straight from the FTP site if they want hard copies. So we kind of offload that cost to the contractor, and we're not collecting deposit and less paperwork and less, money transaction going on. So it's good for both ends. The next item is the utility fee back charge for electrical. We are bringing in a primary service. We are disconnecting our existing primary service. We are upgrading the existing 800, I believe. We're upgrading that to 1200 kW. So this fee represents that the utility company is going to have to be not so much contract, but we have to coordinate with them in terms of them disconnecting the existing primary and reconnecting the existing, the new primary service when we are ready for them to do that. So there's obviously they have to send their crew out to do this work, so there will be a fee. I don't know if they were into prorate this or they have to be paid in one swoop. So that's yet to be known. And so we had to get there and start talking to the utility company and feel them out, so to speak, to see if what we have allowed here, 35,000, is in the ballpark, or we have to move some other fund into this line item. The next item is the miscellaneous expense. That's just to carry for, it's $3,000, so it can be spent anywhere. Almost like an allowance, but very small allowance. Then we move on to the testing and inspection. The 65,000 is that is here is for air monitoring, air sampling for the hazmat removal process. We need to, the abatement subcontractor most likely, in our case, will set up, area they want to do the abatement. And then we have a third-party consultant that is contract direct with the school to do air monitoring. So make sure that nothing leaks out from that area, from that containment area. And once the containment area is set up, they're gonna set up air monitoring outside of it. And then once the work is done, they're gonna have to go into that containment area and take air sample to declare that that space is clean and is free of asbestos. Then everything can be taken down, and then they move on to the next area. So that is a process that needs to happen, and so we allow 65,000 for a third-party consultant to be contract directly with the school to do this service. The next item, sweep inspection and report. We didn't disturb any ground, meaning site work, more than an acre. So we don't need to do all that inspection and report back to the state. So that's NA on our project because we only have the field and that's less than an acre. Okay. The next item is the material testing and inspection. We have concrete testing that we need to do. We need to do soil testing. We need to do structural steel testing. And we also need to do fire stop, fireproofing if there is fireproofing, but most likely it's for fire stop in terms of inspection. So that is again a stand alone third-party agent that will contract direct to the school that is not working for contractor, is working for the school. So they're going to be on the lookout for the school. So that is the service again that need to be contracted out. Once this service doesn't have to come in now. It had to come in when we receive our bid, and if everything is okay, that we are able to move into the actual construction phase, then those services are needed. That's why we didn't have any, we didn't write any RFP for them yet. So those are later on once we receive our bid, and then we know that we have a project that is going to go into construction. Okay. The next group is the interior furniture, equipment, and system. The first item is the teledata communication network security. That is a bid item, but also right now we are working closely with the current vendor for the school security and network vendor to do almost like a design build, but is do state contract. So that is what we that Garrick's team is working on right now to design to design all the infrastructure for security, network, communication, data to fit our budget. So we don't have a complete, so far we haven't have a scope review with them yet. So we're gonna wait and see. Next item, furniture, furnishing equipment. I put here $50,000 just for loose furniture. Maybe there's a desk that needs to be replaced, or there's a couple of chairs need to be replaced. This by no means is a full-blown furniture package to furnishing the entire or entire classroom, or two classrooms. This 50,000 is not nowhere near that. This is only, like I say, if a classroom needs a desk, it gets replaced, not the whole thing. Unless we can define somewhat a scope so we can revise this number. But right now, this is a placeholder for now of 50,000. Same thing with audiovisual equipment, 10,000 placeholder. You know, that's what 60,000 for this category. And the next item is the soft cost contingency. We budgeted 100,000 on this line item. This again, contingency is to cover anything above this line if any of those servers went above and beyond the original scope, and we need to fund that scope of work. There's 100,000 in the soft cost contingency. So so you can see, because we moved 110,000 into the allowance line item. That's why you the original in the center original soft cost total was 1,982,508, and if you take 110,000 from that, you will become the 1,872,508 number that is shown down here. Again, there's a lot of work that yet to happen. We had to define alternates, and Gary can go into that more than I can. But from what we see right now, we do have a 740,000 over our adopted the adopted budget of 6.2 million. So we need to go back to work on identifying alternates.
Thank you, David. So
Thank you.
I'll make a brief comment about that. CalG is in the process of estimating the construction document set that they received in December. Once we see the estimate based on those documents, then we'll, as we've talked about in previous meetings, work on finalizing alternates. And we understand the goal is to maximize the work that's spent on benefiting children. So we'll certainly adhere to that. Does anyone have any questions?
Just one question, Garrett. Is it standard procedure to budget 100,000 for soft cost contingency?
You want to have some soft cost contingency, and in this project, that's an appropriate size for it. It's something that we'll manage closely, but I think that's enough for what we're going to face in this project.
I actually had a couple of questions as well, Garrett. First is, could you explain a little bit more about removing the third-party review function? Is that just due to the change in timeline with SED review?
Yeah, yep. So when SED review times were up to 48 to 50 weeks, they instituted a third-party review process that allowed districts to move into a separate review queue, if you will. Third-party vendors were doing the reviews on SED's behalf. We are a third-party reviewer, and it was a way to expedite reviews. But now that SED review times are much shorter, we make a decision about, is it worth going third party or not? And in this instance, we think it might be as long or even a little longer to go through a third-party review. So it was more advantageous to stay in the normal SED queue, have it reviewed by SED themselves, and it was also a cost savings on the project. Different size projects have different fees for those for third-party reviews. I think it would have been about $20,000, $15,000 or $20,000 from SED to go that route. So it was good savings.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And also one more question regarding the telecom data security. We will, just to confirm, we will still go out to bid on that, even though we're working with our current supplier.
So the way it works is EduTech is on OGS state contracts, and they also have co-ops, which are pre-bid ways to procure technology. And so we'll be working off those and won't need to go out for another bid, since those lists are actually already pre-bid. It's a very standard way to buy technology, and this is an excellent way to do it because we're able to use your trusted vendor. We'll have eyes on it to make sure that pricing's appropriate and that the systems that we're installing are appropriate. But it's a very good way to both manage the consultants that you use and the costs themselves.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Any other questions? Madeline?
Thank you, Garrett and David, for the explanation. With the SED review being 10 weeks out, does that push out our schedule? When can we go to bid? And I think what I'm trying to understand is, will that set us back? We want to start as soon as the school is closed for the year to capture as much time as possible during the summer. So, and I'm thinking if mid-March is when we'll receive their first review or comments, there'll be some back and forth, and it will probably push back the bidding and award process.
David, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, and if we have a delay at SED review, that will happen. And right now we are hoping that they can stick on their schedule. And the bidding phase, we think about the size of project. We think 4 weeks is enough. So mid-March, we get their comment back. We go back and forth. 2 weeks, we should be able to get them to certify or approve or permit the project. So by, let's say, close to end of March, we'll be done with SED approval. Then we go out to bid, and the month of April will be bidding. And by the end of the April, we should be able to study the bid and recommend to the board if we're going ahead with the project with the different contractor. Then we go into contract phase. So we are looking at the May, by middle of the May or third week of May, we should be able to done all the what do you call the paperwork for the contract, meaning getting all the insurance and all the bonds that is necessary to sign the contract. Because without those documents, we are not gonna have the school sign the contract. Okay, so I'm hoping that by the third week of May that will happen. Then we still have a month and a half until the end of June. So the contractor kind of have a month, let's say just a month. They can do all their submittal and also procurement of the material that they need for the summer work. We are also in discussion we're gonna ask the school also to be involved. We were talking about phasing, logistic, how much the school can live without, and how much space the school can free out for construction work. And we need to have that dialogue going, so we can put a set of a phasing document or a schedule in the bidding document, so the contractor are locked in, or at least we have a roadmap, so to speak, in terms of how they should proceed with the work, and what are we looking at in terms of turning the space over to back to the school so the school can function. And then we move on to the next area. So that is something that we're going to be, coordinating together with Garrett's team and school and us, to kind of mold that into some kind of action that people can understand, and they can follow that. So not to say any contractor come in and just have no idea how they're gonna proceed with the work. So I don't know if that answered your question, but yes, if there's a slip on SED review, yes, we are gonna be in somewhat a tight schedule. But
Thank you.
if right now, if 10 weeks holds, what I just say, that's the order things will happen. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Garrett, do you concur, or do you have anything
Yeah,
to add?
yeah, I think if we can get out SED in 10 weeks, we're going to be in good shape. And even if it's a little longer than that, I think we'll be okay. But we'll push out if they're slower than that.
So we discussed the cost in detail offline. I just want to, I think, bring up the fact that the team should spend a little bit more time on the furniture and furnishing that last section to really quantify the scope, and make sure that we all know what includes and what's not included as part of the project, because that number may go up from 60, may go up. And then the other thing that would be really helpful moving forward is to eventually track the spend to date. So as the project starts, we can see how much we've used to date and see how much we have to complete the project.
Yes, agreed on both counts.
Thank you. Dusty, we don't need to share the screen anymore. I think we can switch out of that. Thank you. And then does anyone else have any questions or comments? James, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late. I wanted to know about what kind of this might have been covered earlier, but what the bidding environment or the climate is for bidding right now. And I suppose that adjustments in the budget have been wired into the projection of what you think the climate is right now.
Yeah, that's what we're working on right now. We are in the process of doing the construction budget, the CD budget, construction document budget. So that will, we're gonna call vendors, supplier, and see what is the number out there, to adjust the budget accordingly. Obviously, it seems like the construction industry did not stop working. Actually, it kind of, that initial 2 to 3 months of a slowdown or shutdown kind of put them into a hyper speed to try to catch up. So I hope by the time our project is out to bid, everybody has catching up on their work and they're looking for new work. That would be good. If they're still busy on finishing up the work that they have already contracted and scheduled, then, I just don't know if they will be that aggressive in terms of bidding the project. If they try to line up work, they would be aggressive. If they just, bid in as normal, and that is, but we're gonna advertise the project, as wide as we can. We have several news service that we working together. We always send them, the information regarding the project. They post to their bid plan room, and we also upload the bidding document to their plan room. So any subcontractor is looking for work can actually pick apart what they want to bid on the project itself. And most of the subcontractor will contact my office and try to get the whoever is bidding as a GC or HVAC or electrical, or if they bidding those subcontractor trade work, they will contact us to get the list of bidder. So we try to facilitate the bidding process as open as possible. So so there's more people interested on bidding the job. There's more competition. The price comes down. That's how I, normally think. Obviously that may not be true, but I think the competition is the force, to level the playing field.
Sarah, did you have a question?
I think David answered it. It was really about how we're advertising and getting the word out
Oh,
about
good.
the project
Okay.
to ensure
Yep.
that we get everyone interested.
Yeah.
I will add that last year was a turmoil, very tumultuous year, and the bid market does not like risk. And so that was a really challenging bid market. I see a lot of the risk factors starting to even out a little bit here. And so I'm hopeful that that's going to reflect in the bids that we see. People understand how to deal with coronavirus. They understand the rules and requirements now. We're talking about a vaccine, and this is a very long project. So I think there's also some optimism that comes out of that too. And pessimistic bidders are not the kind of bidders you want. You want to see an optimistic, hungry group. And I think there are a lot of signs that are leading us in that direction for these bids in the spring. So hopefully that will be true.
Gary, I assume that the coronavirus is the only serious risk factor. Are there others?
Well, I would also add material supplies, because the supply chain's been really impacted by this, so that, we deal with the local contractors and those personnel, workforce, but getting materials, for those of us who go to Home Depot on a regular basis, the pressure treated lumber bins were empty for periods of time and prices went up. And so those are some of the other risk factors that I would add in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have other questions or comments for Garrett, Herrick, and David? Okay. I will add that I appreciate having Madeline on the team with her expertise. And I also am glad that Carl has been through this before. So as we were talking about, when you look at how we use the space in the school, I think that's going to be very helpful, seeing as he has completed a capital project in his previous district.
Yeah. Yep.
So hopefully we should be in good hands there. Okay. I think we're good then, unless you have anything else, Garrett?
No, ma'am. Ready to go.
Okay.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. We'll see you next month.
Yes, we'll see you next month.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good night.
Bye,
Take care.
Eric. Bye, David.
Bye.
Thank you. Okay. Great. Thank you, Carl. As we move Garrett to let's see, do we lose? Nope, we still have all the board members. Great. Okay. Thank you. And now we're going to bring forth April Francis, who is the consultant working with the Anti-Racism and Equity Task Force. She's here to present to the board and give us an update on where the task force is at this point. April, welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. I appreciate your time. I know you're familiar with some of the other faces of our board members who serve on your task force.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, I, definitely Carl and Jocelyn and David and Madeline. So we've been working together since the summer, and I'm happy to share. I had to put on my math hat for the last portion that we just went through. So I got my accounting figures back together. So I'm happy I was here for that.
Well, we appreciate your patience. Thank you. Thank you for joining.
So Dusty, I believe, has the presentation. Okay. And when she gets it started, we will share. One thing that I really loved about this task force is that it started out as with various stakeholders. It had teachers, administrators, parents, and board members. So that was such a strong sign to see that you really were wanting to do this work holistically. So I just want to give you kudos for that. So, okay, thank you, Dusty, for getting it up. So what we've been doing is professional learning for strategic planning, calling it an institute. And this presentation is just to give you an insight of our journey thus far. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is just a little bio about myself. I've been in education for over 17 years, started out as a social studies teacher, served on some state committees for social studies and also for the culturally responsive and sustaining framework, which is a major part of the work that we're doing or utilize to help us with the equity team, the task force. And presently I'm the Director of Diversity, Equity, Inclusivity on Long Island at Eastern Suffolk BOCES. We'll go, yeah, thank you, Dusty. So one major part about equity teams, and we spoke about this in the summer, for them to be successful, there are some core pieces, and I just added 3 of the core pieces. One is understanding definitions and concepts around DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, and CRE, or culturally responsive education. So grounding the group was a starting point of our work together. Another piece was, once we were grounded, was developing a mission statement and priority areas based on a research-based framework, which we'll show in the presentation. And then after that was beginning to, or creating a action-oriented strategic work plan that would be sustainable, to show that this wasn't just an initiative for this year, but this was something that the district was working to incorporate in everything that they do. So those are some of the tools for a successful equity team. We'll go to the next, thank you. All right, so grounding the team. What we first started talking about was definition. And I know that the team was, due to the social unrest over the summer, very zero in on wanting racial equity and how do we ensure anti-racism. So Dusty, we'll go to the next one. And we talked about the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and some of the definitions that Ibram Kendi includes. And one of them, I'm sorry, Dusty, I didn't mean to make you the clicking person, but there are some clickable things. Okay, is that anti-racism, the definition is anyone who is seeing the races as equal, right? So sometimes people see words or titles and they're not sure about what it actually means. And so the term anti-racism is treating all cultures equally, and we call that cultural pluralism. And that the idea of an anti-racist is a person who is going to work to create those policies and uncover inequities and develop systems that will lead to equality for everyone. So we can go to the next slide. This one might have a couple of clicks, just so you know.
You may have to prompt me.
Okay, yep.
April.
You can keep going and I'll talk about each.
Okay.
So we talked about systemic racism, which is very, aligned to anti-racism, why we have to even talk about anti-racism. We'll go to the next one.
Am I clicking down here? Is that
You can
this
just
little
click,
arrow?
oh
Or
no,
just the next slide?
no, click on the sheet on the slide itself, because there's a couple of pictures
Okay.
that pop up.
Gotcha.
Yep. We talked about the difference between equality, equity, and justice, right? The equality is everything is the same, everyone receives the same, but equity is giving everyone what they need. And you can click again. We also talked about explicit and implicit bias, as well as one more, microaggressions, right? So implicit bias is something that we're unaware of, and we all have implicit bias. Once we become aware of it, how do we work to do better? And understanding that because we have bias, sometimes that bias leads to microaggressions. And we'll click again, Dusty. I would have made it less clickable. I didn't know that you were going to do this, so my apologies.
That's okay.
So, and microaggressions are towards statements towards different groups. So we talked about these terms, we had conversations, we unpacked, and we were able to then have a base understanding so that we can begin doing the work. And we'll go to the next slide. And we also talked about, right, where are we at on this continuum of working towards anti-racism? So developing a mission statement and priority areas. So once we understood those terms, we then delved into the culturally responsive framework to help us develop our mission statement and priority areas. So we'll go to the next slide. In 2018, New York State Education Department said that this was something they felt all districts needed to adopt. They felt that this was the plate. It was not another initiative, and they created a 64-page document that connected to all stakeholder groups in school systems. That meant higher ed, state ed, district superintendents, school building leaders, teachers, students, and families and communities. So it gave all of these stakeholders 4 principles to align or to understand and connect so that they know how to create culturally responsive communities. So on the next slide, it shows what those 4 principles are. Oh, just to back up. It also grounds us in the definition of what culturally responsive and sustaining education is. And the state says it's grounded in a cultural view of learning and human development in which multiple expressions of diversity, which is race, social class, gender, language, sexual orientation, nationality, religion, and ability, are recognized and regarded as assets for teaching and learning. And that's where we're talking about that cultural pluralism. Our students come to us and we have to see them as bringing knowledge as well as we're giving them knowledge. So constructivist thinking in education. And so with that understanding comes the 4 principles. That's on the next slide, Dusty.
Okay.
So it has a lovely graphic of the students being the tree, right? And those branches are those stakeholder groups that I spoke about. And it says that all of those stakeholder groups can align with these 4 principles. Principle 1 is how are we creating a welcoming and affirming environment for our students and our families. Principle 2 is how are we fostering high expectations and rigorous instruction. Principle 3 was how are we creating inclusive curriculum and assessments. And principle 4 is how are we incorporating ongoing professional learning. And we'll go to the next slide. So what we did as a group is we read each of the principles, and in the document itself, there's about, I'd say, 15 bullets under each principle. And what we did with the principles were we looked at where the district was. So out of those bullets, what bullets were the district, already doing well? What areas was somewhere that the district was doing, in the middle or just beginning? And then what areas did they want to set as a future goal? And by using this research-based framework, it then allowed the group to start building what was the mission statement that they wanted to create and what were the key priority areas they wanted to focus on as a task force. So we'll go to the next slide. So we use this technique, it's called the question formulation technique, which allows people to brainstorm and then bring together some main points. And from there came the mission statement that the group created. And that states, the Garrison Union Free School District Anti-Racism and Equity Task Force is committed to recognizing, addressing, and dismantling racism in all its forms. We are dedicated to creating, fostering, and sustaining a safe and inclusive environment in which differences are valued, respected, and supported in all areas of school life. We want to produce self-reflective students who experience academic success, who view the world with a critical lens, and who are prepared to be responsible and empathetic global citizens. Then they came up with 4 priority areas. The first one is to implement racially inclusive curricula and assessments. The next one was to engage all teachers and staff in ongoing professional development. The third is to create a safe environment of dignity, respect, empowerment, and inclusivity. And the fourth is to evaluate the work of the task force, ensure its success, and sustain the work over time. And as you can see under each priority area, there are some bulleted points, and those began to serve as our goals, right? How are we going to achieve these priority areas? So that was the next portion of our work together. And we can go to the next slide, Dusty. So creating a sustainable action-oriented work plan. So what we did is we did case study of different districts. So this one was Mamaroneck, they're doing this work as well. And we looked at the process they went through. We looked at how they formulated their strategic plan. We also looked at some, NIAC has some information as well. Schenectady. So there's a few districts around our area that we looked at to help just have a base knowledge of what a strategic plan looks like. And we can go to the next one. And after we looked at those, we understood and unpacked what a logic model is. And a big part of a logic model is what are your inputs, what are your outputs, and what are your outcomes? And logic models really keep you accountable. Right? It helps you to create measurable goals, and it helps the plan or your task to continue even if the group who created it is no longer there. And that's that sustainability piece. We can go to the next one, Dusty. So we worked on creating SMART goals, right? SMART means S is specific, M is measurable, A is attainable, R is relevant, and T is timely. And after creating the SMART goals, we looked at a template on how to develop a strategic plan or action plan. And we can go to the next slide. So we use this template, which at this point, they are well filled in. They're being tweaked now and finalized. It's really excited about the work that the team did, because some of us come with knowledge of doing this, and then some of us had no knowledge. And so everyone working together, bringing their expertise in the area, whether it's teaching, whether it's being a parent in the community, whether it's being on the board or an administrator, and working and massaging this plan together, which allows for buy-in from the community, right? It's not someone coming in and telling you how to do it, it's you really doing the work and putting in the effort to do it. And I think this is the last slide coming up. So some possible next steps, really we're finalizing the work, the action work plan. I know that within the school, they're continuing to share some DEI and CRE resources with their staff, and potentially maybe holding some type of community forum at some point too. And these, as I said, are tentative. So that is just my share for this evening. And I appreciate Carl allowing me to come and meet the rest of the board and present to the community at large too.
Thank you, April. And I really appreciate the information. I'm sorry we had a couple members, one member who is in the audience, just so you know, but who isn't feeling well enough to be on camera this evening. And another who couldn't be here, who I hope will watch your detailed presentation. In seeing it, I can tell why the board members who do serve on the task force are so excited by the work the task force is doing. And I have one question that I'll kick it off with, but at the end, you sort of touched on this, but where do you feel we are in the process in terms of bringing a plan back with recommendations to the board from the task force? Is that something we should expect like in the next month, in the coming months?
Well, I feel like our last meeting that we had, we generally were almost finished with the plan. We wanted to review it one more time just to tweak some of the additions that each group or subcommittee placed. After we did our work together yesterday, each subcommittee presented and then they received some feedback. So with that feedback, they're going to go back and massage what they wrote. And I guess, hopefully I would think it would be the beginning of February would be the time.
That's great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Do I have any other questions from other board members? Scanning my squares here. I've gotten pretty good at this. I'm sure you have to. James, please go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to thank the task force in April and for doing this work. It's incredibly important work. I'm wondering about process, just so that we can feel like, that everyone is being, affirmed with the process. That is to say, having enough time for the constituent bodies to weigh in their particular areas. So how much time do we imagine this? What I'm wondering is, this plan will be like a report, I guess is what I'm ascertaining, correct?
Well, the plan
So,
is more of an action plan. So it would be a draft action plan of what the task force is recommending.
okay, so then the recommendations will be an action for the board will be to whether to adopt an action plan, or can you describe how you generally conceive of the experience of getting feedback or input from different constituent bodies?
Sure. So what has been done in previous districts is that allowing the task force to present with the board. So the board would hold a presentation of the task force going over their draft action plan, and then even having a Google Doc where if folks are not able to come to a community forum that evening, they can still give feedback. And then bringing that feedback. So you would have, a teacher forum and a community forum. You can have one and all of those constituents come, depends on how you want to organize it. There was a student forum as well, but in the other districts, they have a high school, so it's a little different. But allowing them to have some feedback. So say if it's in February that it's presented to the board, within that month, maybe into the beginning of March, having some type of community forum and getting that feedback. And then just reading it over and seeing what can be inputted and updated. But parts of the plan would already begin to happen because some of it has to do with administrative activities, like looking at curricula, getting teacher committees and having conversations with teachers. So those are pieces that could happen in the time of waiting for the community to weigh in.
David?
April, I think that people would benefit, all of us would benefit from, you've had a lot of experience doing this with other districts. Why don't you take one example of something that really has worked well in other districts, and maybe one example where things have really been tough to implement and make happen, just to put some flesh on it, on the experience that other districts have had. So what really works and what really hasn't worked so well?
So what really works well is having district stakeholders working together. So so similar to the task force that you all have, you have board members, you have teachers, you have administrators, you have parents. So that having those different voices on a team works very well, and allowing some type of community forum to allow them to give feedback keeps transparency and is inclusive of everyone, because that's what equity is really about. What hasn't worked is just relying on a group to come in and do the work, and then when they leave, there's no sustainability because it never took hold. So there could be implicit bias training and workshops for teachers, but when that group leaves, there is no one to continue it. So ensuring that you're empowering your own staff, you can have PD, folks come in, but then helping your staff to develop that leadership in themselves so that they can turnkey it. So that's a very important piece too. At Eastern Suffolk BOCES, where I'm working at now, they had been doing equity work for the last 2 years, and they created this position to ensure that it was sustained and not just added on to another person's job responsibility, but really giving it the time. Some districts create equity officers. And that is a stipend position where a teacher might have a lesson load, and then they are also helping to ensure that the plan is being implemented.
Thank you, April. David, do you have a follow-up? Or James, did you have a follow-up to your question below? I'm sorry if I cut you off earlier.
No, I don't. Not really. You know, I think the biggest, you know, I've served on a lot of task force in my time in education, and the most important thing is that the task force feels like their work is valued and, you know, and taken seriously, and that it's given the due diligence that a task force deserves, so that the work is, you know, can be forwarded and implemented. So you know, obviously with everything going on this morning, process and governance is like is something that matters to me in different ways. But yeah, so that's what I want to make sure that all the good work gets honored, you know. And I think if we can do it, if it's processed right and implemented right, then that good work will get honored, you know.
Agreed.
And that's-
Jocelyn, I'm sorry, Jocelyn had her hand up, David, and then I'll come to you.
Well, mine is not a question, but I just wanted to comment while April's here with everyone to just say that you, April, you've been such a fantastic facilitator for us. Thanks to Carl for bringing you in, and thanks for working with us. It was important, I think, to our task force to have someone with so much experience and resources and knowledge. And you're so good at just keeping the group together and working strong and forward. So I really appreciate it. And thanks for coming tonight to really wrap up this. Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate the passion your group has, because this is work of the heart. And I, you know, shared that with you all yesterday. So thank you.
David?
April, as you know, we had a very ugly experience in the community over at the library a few days ago, and you all know about it. And it makes me think this, or want to ask you this. I doubt that any of the players, any of the parents, board members, faculty, students, whatever, who weren't comfortable with this process would acknowledge that. I mean, it just isn't politically correct to acknowledge that, you know, this sounds like a lot of stuff that I have other better things to be doing. So on the assumption that there is some kind of embedded hostility among certain elements in any community to what we're trying to accomplish here, you can't, since we're not assuming that everybody has a good heart and wants to do the right thing and just needs some examples of how to manifest that. How do you deal with that kind of hidden, opposition, hostility, resistance? Maybe is the better way to put it.
Well, I feel like this type of work is twofolded, right? It's working and speaking with the doing professional development and helping people understand DEI and those things, but it's also working to look at policies and structures and beginning to shift those. So if those who know that this is important put that effort into revising things and ensuring that this equity work is sustained, then everyone has a right to an opinion, but we also want to ensure that all of our students feel welcomed and all of our students feel supported, and that we're giving our students those windows and mirrors. So maybe there's not a lot of another group of students that come to the school, but they have an idea of others through the curriculum. I think that's a way that you're able to balance, you know, some of the groups that may not support this. So it's doing, you know, two pieces. You have to change those structures, and you also, you know, do your best to do the PD to support those to move along that continuum of equity.
Thank you. Madeline?
I just want to thank you, April, and Carl for bringing April. It has been great. And exactly everything that Jocelyn said. You really brought us together as a group, as a school, as a community. And just having these discussions now, you know, what happened recently in the library and ways that the school is preparing to make sure that we create safe environment for everyone. It's exciting work and needed work. And I really like the idea of figuring out how we make it sustainable moving forward, because you know we're not all going to be there the same group on the task force, and teachers might be different, the students are different. So if we can find a way to also get the students to understand what's going on and explaining it to them, and also they can start spreading or understanding what we're trying to do here, that would be great.
Mhm. Thank you, Madeline. And you could definitely include an 8th grade student on some conversations, right? Getting a student point of view and having them lead that work in the school. I think that would be powerful.
I also, just to say to David's point, in terms of getting everyone on board with this, I do feel like these feedback channels for allowing the teachers and the community to see the plan, digest it, and offer feedback are really key. And I'm very excited about that. I have one more follow-up in terms of process. And this is actually a question more for Carl, I believe. But a lot of the exciting things that I believe the task force is talking about and has been mentioned in your presentation were professional development, things like that. So to make that a reality in a district, we need to factor it into our budget for the coming year as well. So how do you see marrying these conversations and the potential adoption of some of the actions from the task force into our budget conversations, Carl?
Sarah, you're 100% correct that not all the initiatives will be budget drivers, but many of them will. Yeah, PD, new curriculum materials, curriculum programs, and my subgroup yesterday. We were working in 3 subgroups with the task force yesterday, and we talked a lot about it doesn't have to be working on, let's say, the next gen standards, or working on, equity and inclusion within the curriculum. The two go hand in hand. So I do think a lot of the work that is in front of us and that has already begun and needs to continue. This, and April did touch on this earlier, but they're integrated, and I think having this work that's coming out of the task force, the recommendations, having it integrated into all that we do as a school district, all of our practice, all of our teaching, when we're analyzing a new curriculum program and evaluating it, making sure there is that lens of equity, and that our staff is trained and understands how to do that and evaluate something that's appropriate for us. So, I do anticipate that you will see this in our budget process. I will be presenting, the part of the budget that is more of the narrative, more of the story, what is aligned with our district goals. And then Joe Jimick, of course, will present the financials and the detail and, the tax levy and all that important information. And we'll work as a team, but you will see in the narrative of the budget presentation how it aligns with what we want to accomplish.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Do I have any more questions or thoughts to share with April while we have her here for this presentation? From anybody? I'm looking at my squares again. Okay. Oh,
That
Jimmy,
question.
go ahead.
I just April, can you just? I think you said some pretty genuine things. How would you characterize this goes to David's point, so forgive me for being redundant or poorly worded, but April, how would you characterize the openness of our community toward this work?
Yeah, I really wouldn't be able to characterize that because I haven't been in the community to meet and see. I've met those on the task force. I lived in Mohegan Lake a couple of years ago. Garrison's 20 minutes, but it's different, as we know, districts can be different. So I, just based on what has been brought to the group, I hear that there could be those who are not supportive, but I have never been in a place where you had 100% buy-in on anything. And I think part of what we're doing when you're doing what's right for students, right? New York State Education Department has these tests and they're looking at how we can revamp it. No one was 100% behind those things, but there are certain stances that we have to take when we know it's for the greater good, right? And equity work is not easy, but it takes people wanting to push it forward and say that this is what we need to do for our students, because this is really about kids.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate the work, and I can't agree with you more how fundamental it is. And I think it's my, one of the hardest things is the self-education that goes along with how to think critically within these terms of equity, equality, racism. And I think you're doing the good work. So thank you very much.
Thank you, James. And thank you all for having me this evening.
We appreciate your time and all of your energy into our district. Thank you. And I hope to hear from you again once we have a presentation from the task force in terms of some actionable items you'd like the board to look at.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Be well, everyone.
Be well, thank you.
Thank you, April.
Okay, everyone. We are going to move on. We are now on discussion item C for the evening. Discussion item C is to look at the charge for of the Anti-Racism and Equity Task Force. Now that the task force, as we just heard, is looking at potential action plans, it feels appropriate that we would look at creating a formal charge similar to what we have for some of our other standing committees. Now, some of these committees that we have are board committees that are things like required by law, such as our audit committee. Others are like the planning committee, which you all had a sample charge of in our packets this week. And the charge basically describes why the board established the committee or task force and outlines the main purpose, objectives, clarifies how the members work together. It should also describe the guidelines for appointing a chair to the committee or task force, the makeup of the members. In this case, as we heard tonight, and as I think the task force has done a really good job, it's really important to have multiple constituent groups in these types of conversations. And it may also dictate the frequency of the meetings and whether there's a necessity for creating an agenda at this. So you all saw the planning committee one. If you have suggestions for what should be included in a potential charge, let's have a discussion about that and then keep this moving forward. I will suggest that perhaps we reach out and have Carl draft something for us, including some of our ideas, and bring it back to the board for us to adopt at the next meeting. Does anyone have any thoughts on what should be included in this charge in terms of based on the outline we saw?
I think that because it's so broad and there could be so many things, but we have a good example that I would be happy to have Carl draft it, and then we can, discuss or comment on it, right? Because it's to pull things out of the blue of who should be, it should include all the things that are in the policy. It should include, suggested membership, right? To make sure that it represents the community. It should define what the task force's powers, so to say, or goals are. But otherwise, I think I would feel comfortable reviewing what Carl, you might draft, or anyone else who drafts it, and then discuss it. It's hard to come up with it, just out of thin air.
Okay. Anyone else? Madeline?
I just have a question. What is really the difference between the task force versus any of the other committees that, aside for the ones that are required by law? Is the task force similar to just another committee, or is it called the task force because it's gonna, and I guess that's what the charge might be, but I'm trying to understand it.
My understanding, and I will let Dusty and Carl jump in here if I'm incorrect on this, is that a task force is more of a limited, we're going to focus on this one issue, return a report with actionable items and move forward. Whereas our committees are standing, where you deal with finance every year, we deal with the audit every year. You know, planning could be considered a standing committee, which is what we have it established as. But maybe it really is more like a task force once we're done with the coherence plan. And that could be something the board looks at down the road. Am I on the right path here, guys? Anybody?
Absolutely, Sarah. You
Okay,
described it perfectly.
Okay, so this is when the task force was initially established, it was, we need to take immediate action on an issue that has risen in the community and in our country. And we are going to do it by establishing this task force. And now we're starting to see, and then we brought in the consultant, and then we're looking at what the task force can do. One of the things that I think is important is at the bottom of the planning committee charge, you see that there's a paragraph there that really talks about, you know, that the task force can't take action. It needs to bring actionable items back to the board, and then the board approves them and then hands them off to the administration or the people who can take action on those once they've been approved. And sort of establishes that, which I think is helpful for us to know and for the community at large to understand the process. Any other thoughts on the charge?
I mean, just since you just one quick thing is you mentioned perhaps the idea the task force was created in a moment, and it's going to wrap up a very important part of its work by delivering the plan. And so I almost wonder, will the task force live on as a task force then, or is there going to be potentially the development of an equity committee, which would be like maybe a build, instead of calling it a task force anymore, once we've got this on board and perhaps adopted as a plan, does it become sustained by becoming a committee rather than a task force? So
I think that's a great question, but it would be great to see that come out of the work. Like, I'd love to know if that's one of the recommendations as to how we establish that. What are best practices in other districts? So again, I bring that question back to our consultant, to April, and say, what are other districts doing with this? Do you make a long-standing committee? Most of our committees are board committees without the sort of community teacher administrator involvement per se that you have on this task force. So how do we keep that alive going forward?
Most of our committee charges do suggest community members are part of them. It's just that we don't have community members necessarily part of them yet. So I think
we do have one or two, and I have to say, I mean, I really always appreciate that Mr. Lunenpack agreed to join the audit committee. We haven't had extensive interest in some of our committees, and so how to keep the excitement and interest in this task force alive would be, I think, a question for the group itself and for the consultant, because this is different than something we've done in the past. And perhaps it's just because audit doesn't sound as exciting. I don't know. But that, how do we generate that going forward? And what does that involve? Would be great to have part of that plan that comes back and that goes out to the community for feedback.
I think the charge ought to, I'm sorry, I'm putting my hand up there.
Yeah, I see you. Go ahead.
I think the charge should definitely, kind of embrace the work that's been done, right? And so, but I'm sure that'll be, that's it. That's my only recommendation. But this is the conversation we're having about this, what is jurisdiction? What is proper process? what is proper governance from a board standpoint versus committee standpoint versus task force, all that stuff. It's super important so we don't undermine any good work. We want to make sure that that is worked out properly so that we can make sure that the recommendations and the implementations that go forward succeed, right? So whether that is, I think, to Jocelyn's point, you know, that might be one of their first recommendations is, you know, implementation towards sustainable work, right? So how do we do that, you know? And we would love to know the task force opinion on whether the board, at least as a board member, I would like to know the task force's opinion on the best ways to make sure that this work is sustained and, you know, achievable, etc.
And I will add that one of the most important parts I find from, while we have 3 board members sitting on the task force, having it come as a report, the process there shows that it is representative of the teachers, administrators, the parents, the community members, so that it shows everyone's voice was considered and engaged in the process. And I think that will help as we, with the sustainability of it. David, I'm sorry, you had something.
No, it's no longer relevant. Go ahead.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the charge? All right, so we'll have Carl, you'll draft something and bring it back to us for the next meeting. Okay,
I definitely will.
thank you. I'll go through I lost my papers. Okay, here we go. Excellent. We're gonna keep moving now. On to board discussion. So next up, we have the anti-racism resolution / reaffirm welcoming and inclusion resolution. So this, I want to be clear that the resolution was proposed by a board member, and this is not being put forth by the task force. A task force doesn't write resolutions. The board proposes and writes resolutions for ourselves. We have the option to reaffirm the welcoming and inclusion resolution if we wish, as we wait for the task force's recommendations. You all have the draft. I am happy to read it as well, if you'd like. Or do you?
I think it's long.
It is long, but
I don't think it should, no.
Okay.
I mean, I guess you could, but.
Well,
I mean, that's just my opinion. If others please weigh in.
How about for people who are attending? I mean,
yeah, I think I might read it for everyone attending. Madeline?
Where is the draft? I don't see it.
I don't think it got attached. I have the draft that was sent around in the Google Doc.
Okay, the Google Doc, okay.
And why don't I read it just so we're all in the same, and so people understand what we're discussing as we move forward. And you'll just have to bear with me because it is long, and I will do my best to read it correctly. Whereas the Garrison Union Free School District Board of Education is committed to providing safe, welcoming, and affirming spaces for all students, staff, families, and community members, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, religion, sexual identity or orientation, ability or disability, country of origin, or any other identity, category, or characteristics. The Board of Education is committed to recognizing, addressing, and dismantling racism in all its forms. And whereas recent events and tragedies in our nation have served as a catalyst, spurring an urgent sense of responsibility for leaders and community members to stand in solidarity with our Black, Indigenous, people of color community, we declare unequivocally that the voices, lives, aspirations, and futures of BioPEC students, staff, and people in our community matter. And whereas we acknowledge that this resolution does not diminish the commitment of the Garrison Union Free School District in the pursuit of its vision for all students to learn to their fullest potential. Rather, this resolution demonstrates our responsiveness to the dynamic needs of our diverse community and ensures we publicly commit to accelerate our efforts around racial equality, diversity, equity, and inclusion, And whereas the Board of Education recognizes that all of our students have academic potential and bring unique, valuable perspectives and experiences to our classrooms, at the same time, we also recognize that disparities persist in the educational outcomes of students of color, economically disadvantaged students, and students with disabilities. We will always work to raise expectations both socially and academically while closing gaps caused by racial barriers. And whereas the Garrison Union Free School District is committed to systemic improvements of policies, programs, and practices that provide equity in student opportunities to succeed, we continuously monitor the effectiveness of the district's priorities and strategic plan to ensure the success of the whole child. The Board of Education expects the superintendent, administration team, and staff to keep anti-racism, equity, and inclusiveness at the fore as they plan, implement, monitor, and evaluate district-supported programs. Our anti-racism and equity commitments must be integrated in every level of our school district. The Board of Education further expects action and outcomes that are evident to students, staff, and community. And whereas the Board of Education is encouraged by our diverse, capable, compassionate educators and staff who strive for equity, equal opportunity, and justice, we are inspired by their commitment, resilience, and willingness to learn to break down barriers that deny students access to equity and excellence. And whereas the Board of Education recognizes that to more fully live into our values of diversity, equity, and inclusion requires collective action, we acknowledge that strong community partnerships are a point of pride and strength in our school district, and we will investigate innovative ways to enlist them in these efforts. The Board of Education encourages families and community members to have courageous and honest conversations about racism and realize the roles we can all play in improving our students' educational experience and post-secondary opportunities. The Board of Education commits to facing these challenges together with our students, their families, our staff, and our beloved Garrison community. And therefore, be it so resolved that the Garrison Union Free School District is committed and will continually examine itself to ensure it remains an open and inclusive institution of public education for all its students, staff, administrators, families, community members, and supporters. And the Board of Education affirms our commitment and support of our biopic community, and therefore, be it further resolved that the district condemns racism and discrimination in all forms in our schools and community. And the Board of Education stands steadfast in its commitment to foster an inclusive educational environment where every student, staff member, parent, and community member is treated with dignity and respect. We will see each other for our individual worth and human potential. That's it, folks. So I will now turn over who would like to share their thoughts and comments on this draft, the proposed resolution, or how we move forward with this resolution. Anybody? Jocelyn?
Thanks for reading it. I made a few suggested edits in the draft document. So I don't know if I'm maybe looking at just different ones than everybody, but so I don't, there are a lot, there's words. So I just hope that we all get a chance to look at, you know.
Can you address them publicly though? Like which words do you want to change and things?
Oh, it's really, okay, it will take a while, but so for example, in the paragraph where you said, we acknowledge that this resolution does not diminish the commitment, blah, blah, blah. I just suggested saying strengthens instead of does not diminish. So I don't know if everyone can see the document, then I probably don't have to read through every single suggested edit. But I just wanted to point out that there are a few, you know, that I think would just add to the resolution and make it a little tighter.
Okay.
But I didn't see any other edits on there from others.
I have to say that if a graduate school in education needed a great example of EduSpeak, listening to this resolution touches all the edu words that I can possibly imagine, and it would be nice to cut down some of that stuff because it's anesthetizing to me anyway. You know, I don't know. I mean, I I guess my question would be for myself and for everybody else to figure out what's going to be different at the Garrison School because of this resolution.
A resolution is really just a position statement.
Right.
It is not it's not a policy. It doesn't have the effect of a policy.
Right. But does it represent a position that we feel is a different position than we currently have without this resolution? In other words, how does it advance the mission or our sense of what the mission is? Does it? I mean, I'm really asking whether people feel as if we're taking a step forward, and exactly how are we doing that? I mean, I was trying to say is that I assume that we all have recognized the value of we're all anti-racist. I assume. I don't think anybody's going to take a different position on that, and I just don't quite get the concreteness of this thing and how it advances where we are on this issue. But if other people feel that we are, then I'm fine with it.
Jocelyn?
Well, I agree with, how the long and excessive language, but what I do think it can do is validate the task force work. So for example, it's demonstrating to the task force and to the community at large that we, the board, right? Because this is just for us, or for the board as itself, right? That the board is committed to this. So I think it can just help to empower the continued work of the task force. And then if it were to be sustained, could help we can always go back to it to suggest why we're still changing policies, changing structures, and still needing to make changes happen because we're committed to it. So I think that's
I get that.
Probably the only reason to do it, right? Is to have a public stance on it.
It makes it explicit, something that should be implicit, makes it explicit.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't say it, ain't there. And I would say that I think as board members, we might all align ourselves with a specific value around this work, but I'm not sure that. I think it's very important to speak as a board to the community, to articulate our position so that people understand why it matters.
That's true.
Madeline?
I also, just to add to that, I think it's very important because staying silent on it speaks louder. And it also aligns with everything that the task force is working on. So this may be a part of it, the board acknowledging that there's an issue is the first step. And this is acknowledging that we're taking a stance on anti-racism and making sure that we have a united community in our school. So I think that it is very important because it sets the stage that we care and we're saying something about it, and that we also mean what we do. And I'm sure that with the task force, they'll probably follow up with policies or action plans or ways on how to keep it sustainable or merge it with the next gen and the all of the work that the planning committee is also working on.
The one question that I have for everyone is, do we feel that the current welcoming and inclusive community resolution from September 2019, is that language not applicable anymore of the board's stance?
Well, I think that's a different kind of document, because it has less to do with pronouncing anti-racism efforts. It has more to deal with if I remember that coming out of a lot of debate around sexuality issues and trying to say we're a welcoming community, and we of course we were going to include race in that, but I think that's a much more broader position, and this is more targeted in many ways. So I think that they're not completely overlapping.
Okay, great.
Or
So then we're removing,
redundant for that matter.
would we agree that then we're removing the idea of reaffirming that one perhaps?
Do we need to
Yeah,
reaffirm the
I
resolution?
don't think that one's gone away, but I don't know what a reaffirmation does officially. But I would say
Yeah.
we're not, I don't think it's gonna be supplanting it. It's
So
No.
board resolutions, and I can check with, they don't last forever. Is that correct, Dusty? We do need to reaffirm it should we continue to believe in that, but we can do that as a separate conversation then, it's sounding like.
no, that's good to know. So Dusty, are those annual reaffirmations, or is it? I don't
In
get
my
it.
past experience, yes, that was at least, if, and especially if it was a topic, that the board wanted to keep in the forefront. Perhaps, a year later, and certainly as these things come up, in the community and socially, and the things that we see in our world, to reaffirm those. Yeah. But they don't, that's my understanding, is that they don't last forever, and that you really, you may want to consider a reaffirmation.
It sounds like
Yeah,
that.
the welcoming one was September of last year, so it would be due then for that.
Right,
September of 2019.
2019.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we can look at then reaffirming that separate from this one is, and I wasn't on the board when it, so the intention behind it perhaps did not see as much. In terms of moving forward with this draft of the resolution, it sounds like we want to do some more wordsmithing. And I'd like to invite the board members who aren't present tonight to make sure that they are able to add their thoughts and comments, especially in terms of wordsmithing. If there's any dramatic changes, though, it should be done, I believe, in the public meeting. So aside from changing, the example you gave, Jocelyn, is more of a changing language versus if we're going to change the intention of the resolution. Am I correct on that, Carl and Dusty?
Yes.
Getting nods, so
Agreed.
I think so. And I just also want to make sure that, while, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, my internet's spotty, so I don't know if I cut you off or not. I'm sorry. I just want to acknowledge, I totally agree with David, kind of the feeling that, is this going to do anything? Like, I totally had that feeling. So sometimes I wanted a little bit more like promise and action steps in a resolution. But I understand that that's not necessarily what a resolution does. But I do hope that just by passing all of these words, that we continue to act as a board on some of these kind of sentiments that are included, with respect to, taking action in curriculum, professional development, et cetera.
I agree.
Is that right? So
it's just, I think it's really important that, especially having seen, I know you guys have been deeply involved in what the task force is doing, but I want to make sure we respect the process and that it is clear that it comes, I know I said this before, but it comes from the teachers too, and it comes from the parents and community members, so that it is a group of people and that we are accepting their suggestions and recommendations when the task force reports back to the board. And while the board can definitely, it's the board's place to take a position on a topic, in terms of actionable items, I want to hear from the community. I want to know what can we do and what is actionable within our school. And that's the important work of the task force. Carl, did you have something to add?
No, I agree. And Jocelyn, hearing what you're asking or hoping for, I think policy will accomplish a lot of that as well. And I know we do need to get back. We did a lot of work on policy, and we need to revisit and start to move that forward very soon. But policy, I think, is where you can really, as a board, take a position and make sure that, it's something that's followed up on. So the board, the board will, adopt the policy and then approve the policy. And then it is my job and the rest of, the district team to implement the policy.
Thank you, Carl. So if everyone's comfortable to keep us moving forward, I think it's important that we go back, look at the language and in the Google Doc that's been established, and that everyone adds it, and then we'll bring it back again as a resolution for adoption, hopefully when we have everyone here as well at the next meeting. Does that sound agreeable to everyone? Okay. Madeline?
Just to make sure that we're clear, the resolution will be language, important language. And then if we decide to proceed with the policy will have action items, right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and then the policy would have to come from the policy committee. So the committee will meet, review it, and then make the recommendation to the board that we do a first reading of the policy. We have to do we're required by law to do 2 readings of the policy. So we'll do a first reading and then a second reading. At this time of the second reading, we can then look to adopt. But the policy is where you will see the actionable items.
Right, thank you.
But Carl's draft of the resolution will include the intention to have actionable items down the road. I mean, that there's going to be an explicit reference to the fact that we're going to be implementing this. Is that right?
It says here, the Board of Education further expects action and outcomes that are evident to students, staff, and community. My understanding is I believe that's as forceful as we can get in a resolution. Now, in the policy, we can then go into listing out what action items we expect the administration to take. Now, at the same time, then the board doesn't implement any of those actions. We expect them, and then it is up to Carl, his administrative team, and our teachers to implement them, which is part of why I think this task force is so important, because it's including those voices. Jocelyn, if you're speaking, you're muted. Well, no, okay. Does that make sense, David?
Yep.
Okay. So we're all good on the plan going forward. We're gonna all go in, take a good look at this, review the language. I will make sure that our members who are not here tonight do that as well. And again, if you have any changes to what we're saying, please bring it to the meeting versus the actual intent of it in terms of the actual wordsmithing. Okay, I'm gonna move on now, if everyone's all right with it. A lot of presentations this evening. Thank you guys for your patience. President's remarks. I can't believe we're just getting to this. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to keep this very, very brief. Happy New Year. I do have one bit of exciting news that I get to share, and I thank Carl for that. And I want to also thank Carl for making it happen. But our nurse, Melissa, is getting her vaccine. I believe it's tomorrow. Is that correct, Carl? Yes. When Carl found out.
Correct.
Yeah, when he found out from the governor that she was eligible, we got her set up for it. Or Carl did. So thank you so much. I think that's very welcome news and exciting for our district. All right, I'm now going to turn it over for superintendent's remarks.
Okay, and I will move quickly as well. So, Happy New Year to the board, the community. It was great to welcome back our students. They settled in beautifully, and the district is really running well, and we're pleased. That being said, of course, infection rates and the positivity rate is going up. It's not a surprise. We all expected after the holiday that there would be an increase. So we have been steadily above 9%. On the 7-day rolling average positivity for a few days now. Governor Cuomo did have a press conference this past Monday, and some new information did come out of that press conference. The microcluster strategy that I've spoken about and sent communication out about in the past has been changed. It has changed several times. And as that's to be expected, I guess, as we learn more about this virus and how it spreads, and we get new information, new data, it's understandable, but of course it is a bit frustrating, excuse me, with a number of changes. So the latest, and this is the latest that we got verbally from the governor, what he's saying is if a county or a region is steadily above 9%, he didn't specify for how many days. So is that 4 or 5 days or 10 days? We're not sure, and we should know more within a day or two. Department of Health will give more detail, is what we're told. But we will be required to test. Now, the good news is we worked with our local Department of Health. Putnam County has been great. We submitted an order for rapid antigen test probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And over the break, we did receive a box of 72 Bionex tests. So Nurse Melissa was kind enough to pick up those tests. They are secured in the nurse's office. And if we receive a designation, let's say over the next week or so, we are prepared to move forward with testing. Now, what we're not certain, we may be required to test 20% of our students and staff, or we may be required to test 30%. That 72 tests that we have will cover 30% of the staff. So if that is, we can meet the requirement. We've looked, Melissa and I do think we would probably ask for maybe one day, like a Monday, where potentially students learn asynchronously. And we just set up, every 15 minutes drive-through testing, where a parent would pull up with their child, Nurse Melissa, with assistance, but she would administer the test. You would wait for 15 minutes and we would give you the results. You get the results in 15 minutes from this test. So that is good news. I think we're as prepared as we can be. Nurse Melissa also did the training to administer the test. And as Sarah announced earlier, we're excited because tomorrow she will be getting vaccinated. She does need to get 2 vaccinations. It's the first, and then she needs to go back for her second. But it's great to know that our nurse will be protected. She really is the one dealing with children who are sick and staff members, and it's comforting to know that she will be protected. Trying to just give you one quick second. So that is all I have to say about COVID. So the intention right now is to stay open. I also want to thank parents. The other important thing that I want to say is parents have been extremely cooperative. Nurse Melissa reminds me of this all the time. In proactively calling us, travel guidance is something else that has changed. The quarantine duration has changed. It used to be 14 days, then it dropped 10 days. So it confused. Parents have continually reached out when they're questioned, when there is something that appears to be somewhat confusing with the guidance, and I encourage them to continue to do so because that has been very helpful, and of course that helps keep everyone safe. The second topic I want to talk about was touched upon during April Francis's presentation. I think David may have mentioned it, and Madeline, but we, as the board knows, but the community may not know, we did have a disturbing incident at our library, at the Desmond Fish Library, this past weekend. They have an annual event, the Great Bake Off program. It's a family program for parents and children. It was held virtually this year via Zoom, and there was someone who hacked into Zoom and basically spread hateful and racist comments. It was extremely disturbing for all those involved. Jen McCreary did inform me about the incident. I know she's taken every appropriate step by reporting it to the authorities. Also, they do have an equity and anti-racism task force that I know is meeting, and they're going to have further discussion on this. But I assured Jen that our district stands by her and the library staff. I offered any support that we could give, even if it, is counseling for those children, if they were in need of counseling or some advice from our school professionals. And I just want to say publicly that we do stand by our school library, and with our task force, what I'm hoping for is that maybe there's an opportunity to partner with them. And we talked about, inclusiveness and having all the stakeholders involved. So that is one of our goals, and I near future that Jen and I can bridge that and maybe get their task force together with ours. I think that would make a lot of sense. I think we all have the same objectives. And that is all I have for this evening. Thank you. Or I'll take any questions.
One quick question, Carl, for any possible students who may have been affected by the library incident, will the staff be ready to respond if needed?
You mean our staff?
Yeah, our teachers, they can go talk to the counselors if they need to, if they were disturbed.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I offered that to Jen. I don't know. I don't have a list of all the students that were present, Sarah.
Okay.
But hopefully over the next day or so, I will speak with her. But I know also our library staff has reached out to each family as well.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Sorry. Okay, thank you, Carl. We'll keep moving forward here. Next up is accept minutes. I'm going to read the recommended action. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby accept the minutes of the regular meeting of December 16th, 2020. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Oh, second.
Thank you. Dusty, does anyone have any questions, comments? Great. Dusty, will you call the roll, please?
Jocelyn Apicello,
Aye.
David Gelber,
Aye.
James Hoke,
Aye.
Madeline Julian,
Aye.
Sarah Tormey.
Aye. Thank you. Next up, we have personnel items, the consent agenda. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of Carl L. Albano, Superintendent, hereby approves the items of the personnel consent agenda as presented. Okay. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Dusty, this one doesn't say like items B through C. Is that an issue?
Only because what I'm finding is I go back and forth when we have changes to the agenda and have to keep changing that number when it shifts.
Got it.
So I made a modification to just say as presented. So
Excellent.
okay.
Okay, so we can go ahead and move to a roll call vote.
Okay. Jocelyn Apicello,
Aye.
David Gelber,
Aye.
James Hoke,
Aye.
Madeline Julian,
Aye.
Sarah Tormey.
Aye. And I'm sorry, guys, I did rush us a bit there. I didn't leave Carl any time to offer thoughts and comments on the teachers. Just in interest of time, I'm moving us forward. I hope that was okay. Carl, did you have anything you needed to add on this?
That's okay. We're just adding substitutes just in case we need extra help, and they are 2 qualified per diem substitutes.
Excellent. And now I don't need to read B and C, correct, Dusty?
No.
Excellent. Okay, we do not have old business to address. We're moving on to new business, the request for approval of payroll and payable services extension. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District, upon the recommendation of Carl L. Albano, Superintendent, hereby approves the extension for business office services for payroll and payables for an amount not to exceed $5,000 and authorizes the superintendent to execute said agreement. May I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Carl, do you want to speak to this one?
Sure. This is for the Management Advisory Group Business Operations. They've consulted with the district in the past and have done really good work. Right now, we've had some transition as the board is aware. Our business official has retired and our new business official is not starting until early February. And this primarily will be just for payroll to make sure with our upcoming payroll responsibilities in the month of January and all of the W-2s, that entire process, if we need consultation there to provide that consultation to make sure everything is accurate. Dollars, that is a maximum. I would think it'll be more, in the range of about 50% of that, maybe.
I think you're freezing up a bit, Carl. Is anyone else hearing that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Consults.
Okay,
There's no need for this going forward.
great, thank you. Okay, any questions? Okay, I'm going to move to a roll call vote, please, Dusty.
Jocelyn Apicello,
Aye.
David Gilbert,
Aye.
James Hoke,
Aye.
Madeline Julian,
Aye.
Sarah Tormey.
Aye. Thank you. Next up, we have public comment. If you have a comment, please leave it in the chat or the Q&A. Give you a moment to enter your comments. Comment is intended for members of the community to speak openly and voice concerns in accordance with policy 3220 of the Garrison Union Free School District. Any person wishing to comment shall comply with all provisions of the policy. Comments about specific school personnel or individual students is a violation of the board policy. See. Not that I'm trying to rush anyone, but I realize we had a lot of presentations and it's getting late. But I don't see any chat or Q&A questions or comments. I will remind the public in attendance that you are welcome to reach out to the board or to the superintendent's office, or if it's an issue that needs to be with the teacher, please take it there. Okay, now I'm going to move to board member comment. We're just going to go down the list here. I don't remember. Jocelyn, do you have a comment?
No comment, thanks.
David.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, we talked about the op-ed written by the superintendents in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles about the need for some kind of Marshall Plan for large districts. And we talked about expressing our solidarity with them. To try and make it worthwhile, I left a message today with Seth, with Maloney's, Sean Patrick Maloney's education person, to see if there's some way that he could amplify whatever we would choose to do. But for some reason, I don't know, he seemed to not be at his desk or not be answering phone calls today. I can't imagine why, but I will hear from him in the near future.
Thank you. And I will say we did have some follow-up from various members, and we can look to put that on a future agenda. I am trying to be mindful of your time and not create agendas that go on forever. I can do that if you wish, though. But thank you, David. Appreciate it. We're going to move on to James. James, you're muted.
That might be a benefit. Anyway, Happy New Year to everybody. It's been exciting. It's been a crazy day. I think one of the things that I've been thinking about is a lot of things that we're struggling with as a country, we see fall right into our community. And how do we speak to people who have very different viewpoints in the world than we do? And I think that comes through when you're developing task force or strategic plans or whatever, right? And a school is a place where, different people come together who have different viewpoints. And I'm wondering if there's ways for curricularly for us to carve out a space where students can have difficult conversations. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot. And I wanted to express my interest in maybe whether Carl or Allison would like to consider that possibility. This, of course, is just merely a suggestion. And that's it. And also you know, that's it. That's all I wanted to say right now. So having difficult conversations needs to happen, you know, in order for our community to feel more like a community. The difficulty is not in actually the material of the conversations. The difficulty is in how we talk about things and our ability to sit with other people who disagree with us and or might come from a different kind of worldview. And, you know, like I say to my students, you know, I don't think this poem is difficult, meaning it's hard to understand. I think sometimes we are difficult with the poem. We are difficult toward the poem, that we create the difficulty more than the subject matter, more than the poem itself, we create it. And I think that that's true when it comes to these kinds of conversations. So whether it be in the form of elective or guidance conversations, I don't really know. That's beyond my reach, and I don't want to recommend anything too tangible that would amount to a board overreach, but I would ask that something of that kind be considered. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Madeline?
I have no comment, but I do agree with what James just said. It would be great to have a safe space to have discussion.
Thank you. And I'll end with myself. My only comment is that I know conversations like tonight's and all of the discussions we had can lead our meetings to run long, but I think it is so important to have these as a group and to remind the public that the only way we can have these as a group is in a public meeting. So I appreciate the time and energy we put into them. And I appreciate all of your thoughts. If I know this board is incredibly engaged, if you have other things you wish to see on the agenda, please reach out and we will keep having these wonderful conversations about how we can move our district forward without ignoring the important work of the board, which includes things like the budget, the audits, all the other really fun stuff. And I will just end with that there was a lovely comment here from Mr. Lunenpack, who attended this evening and said audit is super exciting, which I really appreciated. And that's all I've got, unless anyone else has anything else to add. We're going to end on that super exciting note about how great audit is. Okay.
David asked us, and I think, you know, David voiced some interest in hearing about racism in, you know, our community. And I just wanted to pass on that in my research for a poem, I came across the name of Kieft, I think is how you say it. It's a Dutch name. He was the head of the West Indian Trading Company, which, you know, we New Amsterdam and New Netherlands, which, you know, you're quite familiar with, I'm sure. So Kieft had a war, and that war destroyed the largest community of the Wappinger Indians, as they would say, the indigenous people of this area. And their main settlement was in Canopus Hollow. So that's how close we get to genocide. You know, and that's in the, that would have been early in those days. So early 17th century, I believe. So there you go. That's a little history right around the corner, right over the hill and down again. So next time I go through Canopus Hollow, that's what I'll remember. Kieft. It's also a strange Dutch name for a plover, which is a small shorebird, but you don't need to know that. So,
but now I do. I appreciate it. Okay, guys, I think if that's it, we do not have an executive session or reason to enter executive session this evening. I'm going to read the recommended action for adjournment. Be it resolved, the Board of Education of the Garrison Union Free School District hereby adjourns a regular meeting of January 6, 2021. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Dusty, will you call the roll, please?
Jocelyn Apicello,
Aye.
David Gelber,
You have to unmute, David.
Sorry. Aye.
James Hoke,
Aye.
Madeline Julian,
Aye.
Sarah Tormey.
Aye. Thank you all for your time this evening, and I will see you in a few weeks. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.